Good morning, children. Last class we started to discuss about sorting of objects, isn't it? Sorting of materials. And you know that there are some properties for the materials that make us realize which material is what. You know, wood has got certain properties, then glass has got certain properties. So now we are going to find out, last class we discussed about main two properties, that are the appearance and the hardness, isn't it? Now today we are going to discuss about other properties of these materials. You know, some materials they may zinc in water. Some materials they zinc in water and some materials they float in water. What is meant by sinking in the water? You know, when we throw stone at the water, what will happen to that stone? Can we see that stone again? No, it will go deep into the water. Am I right? It will go deep into the water. That is what is meant by what? Sinking. And if you throw a plastic ball, a small plastic ball into the water, what happens to that plastic ball? It remains on the top of the water, isn't it? This plastic ball remains at the top of the water. That means it floats. Clear? That is floating and zinking. At home you can check it very easily. You know, when we are taking the bath, we are using the soap dish, you know, bucket, etc. And you know, when we dip the soap in the bucket of water, what will happen to the soap? Some of you have already experienced it. What happened to the soap? It goes into the water, isn't it? Then what about the soap dish? Yes, it will float on the water. That is it. That is floating and zinking. Sinking means what? Go deep into the water or into the water. Floating means what? Can be seen on the top of the water. So why is it so? Why some substances zinc in water? Why some substances float on water? You know that if the substance is heavier than water, then what will happen? They will sink. If the substance is lighter than water, they will float. You know, the soap, it is heavier than water. So when we dip the soap in the water, it goes deep into the water. But you know, soap dish, it is made up of plastic. It's lighter in weight, isn't it? Lighter in weight. So it floats on the water. You know, iron nail is another example. Safety pin is another example. They will all go deep into the water. You know, stone, as I told you earlier, stone also is heavier than water. So it sinks in the water. You know, wood can seen floating on the water. You know, that's the reason why, you know, we are using wood for making the boat. Wood usually float on the water. Wood, plastic float on the water. You know, normal stones, you know, when we throw the stones, you have experienced it, it goes deep into the water. But one difference is there, one exception is there. You know, pumice stone. Pumice stone is a type of stone. You know, last year you studied about the different types of rocks. Hope you remember it. That time we discussed about pumice stone also. That stone can be used for polishing the teeth and for rubbing our feet and all. Rubbing the feet and all. People are using the pumice stone. So this pumice stone, you know, pumice stone, those who have seen it, you can see that so many air holes are there. So many small holes are there on the surface of this pumice stone. So it is because of that air holes, they are lighter than water. So they can be seen on the top of the water, or the pumice stone float on the water. This question can be asked for the examination. Why pumice stone float on the water? This pumice stone, all other stones, you know, they are very heavier. Weight is heavier means what? Weight is more. So they will go deep into the water. But this pumice stone, even though it is a stone, it has got large number of air spaces. Those who have studied, some of you can, I think you can recollect or remember that. So this pumice stone, as it is having small air holes, they will float on the water. And all other stones, they sink in the water. And wood, they float on the water. Plastic, they float on the water. Iron materials, the metals, they sink in the water. So substances that are heavier than water will sink into the water. Substances that are lighter than water, lighter means what? Less weight than water, they will float on the water. Another exception or peculiarity is there in the case of the ship. You all know ship is made up of iron, isn't it? Ship is made up of metal. You know that metal, as I told you, metal sink in the water. But normally ship doesn't sink in the water. You all have seen ship floating on the water, isn't it? So it is because of the particular design. Hope you all have seen the ship. Am I right? Those who haven't seen directly, or those who haven't seen it straight, or they have at least seen in the picture the shape of the ship. A particular shape is there, isn't it? That shape helps the ship floating on the water. That shape helps. It is not the iron that helps. You know, iron is more powerful than what? Wood. So the ship, you know, ship want to carry numerous numbers of passengers, and numerous things also should be carried in the ship. So ship is usually made up of what? Metals. Steel, iron, usually iron, steel and different type of materials are used for making the ship. But they do not float on, they do not sink in the water. It's because of their particular design. The shape of the ship is a particular designer manner only. So that helps the ship to remain float on the water. Clear? That is about the sinking and floating. Another peculiarity or the property of the metal is its transparency. Another property of the material, it is the transparency. That also you studied the last year. You know, 3 types of objects are there. Transparent objects. Yes, tell me next one. Transparent. Next one. Yes, opaque. Then translucent. Clear? These are the main 3 types of objects based on their transparency. Then who can tell me what is meant by this transparency? Tell me. It's the ability of the light to pass through it. It's the ability of the light to pass through it. Such objects, based on that, the ability to pass the light through it, the materials can be divided into 3 main groups. They are transparent objects, opaque objects and translucent. Who can tell me what is meant by transparent objects? Yes, objects that allow light to pass through it. Such objects are known as transparent. You know, air is transparent. You know, another example, you know the glass that wear, isn't it? The glass is transparent. It is because of this transparency only I can see through this glass. If this glass is made up of any other material, if this is made up of, you know, wood or plastic, what will happen? Can I see anything? No. Certainly not. I couldn't see anything. So, this is an example of transparent object. You know, plain glass. Then air is an example of transparent objects. You know, pure clear water. Clear water is also an example of what? Transparent objects. When we look at the clear water, then you can see our face there, isn't it? Because it is transparent. So, the glass is transparent. Air is transparent air. Otherwise, no, if it is not transparent, can we see each other or can we see any object? No. So, air is transparent. Examples, air is transparent, clean water is transparent, then glass is transparent. And some plastics are also there. Some plastics are there. They are also transparent. Clear? So, transparent objects are objects that allow light to pass through it. Allow light to pass through it. Such objects are known as transparent objects. Then what is meant by these opaque objects? Yes, the light does not pass through such objects. Light does not pass through. Such object does not pass through. Through these objects, light does not pass through. Example, you could see book is an example. You know, paper, book is an example. Can you see? Can you see me now? No, because the book is an opaque object. Through this book, light cannot pass. And wood is also an example. Some plastics are there. They are also example of opaque object. And we are example of opaque object. When we stand in the path of light, shadows only will be formed, isn't it? Light cannot pass through our body. Our body is also an example of opaque object. Book is an example of opaque object. Some plastics are example of opaque object. You know the wall, the door, wind, etc. are examples of opaque object. Now what is it? Translucent. It allows light to pass through it. Light to pass through partially. Light to pass through partially. You know what is partially? Some amount of light can be passed through it. But it is not clear. See, some type of plastic is an example. Just observe this plastic. You know, of course, light is passing through it and I can see my hand. But it is not very clear. What is there behind that? It is not much clear to me, because this is an example of translucent object. So this type of plastic is an example of translucent object. So it allows only some amount of light to pass through it. You know the window glass. Some of us are having the windows at home, having the frosted glass. Now school, the glasses are frosted. You can see the light, of course, enters into our classroom, but we can't see very clearly what is there on the opposite side. And you know, butter paper, tracing paper, they all are examples of which type of objects? Translucent. It allows some amount of light to pass through it, or light pass through partially. Partial means what? Just half. Partial amount of light only pass through it. We can make the glass, you know, glass, we all know it is transparent. We can make the glass opaque by making the drawing the designs on it. Nowadays, wherever we can see the glasses, designer glasses are there. So by giving the designs, we can make the transparent objects opaque. Opaque. So these are the main three types of materials based on their ability to allow light to pass through it. They are the transparent objects. It allows light to pass through it completely. And as I told you, the spectacle is an example of transparent object. Air is an example of transparent objects. Then we discussed about opaque object. Opaque objects does not allow the light to pass through it. This is an example of opaque object. Then the translucent object, it allows some amount of light to pass through it. Such objects are known as translucent objects. Clear about these three? Very, very important question for the examination. Transparent, translucent and the opaque objects. Now we can move on to the next session, that is about the conduction of heat and electricity. Conductors of heat and electricity. Heat and electricity. Some substances, they allow heat and electricity to pass through it. In the last class, we already discussed about such substances. Who can tell me the answer? Which type of materials allow the heat and electricity to pass through it? Yes, of course, metals. They are the good conductors of heat and electricity. Metals, they are the good conductors of heat and electricity. Why they are known as good conductors? Metals allow heat and electricity to pass through it. You know, example, we all discussed that the kitchen utensils or kitchen vessels are made up of metals, because the heat should pass through it, isn't it? Then we also discussed about the wires. They are made up of what? Copper. Copper is also a good conductor of electricity. So because of that, these objects are made up of metals. But you have already seen that the handle of the vessels, they are made up of what? Plastics or wood. Who can tell me the answer of that? Yes, absolutely right. The handle, it is made up of plastic because heat cannot pass through plastic. Plastic is a bad conductor of electricity and heat. Bad conductors of heat and electricity. Plastic, wood, there are some examples of bad conductors or poor conductors, or otherwise we can call insulators. That we will discuss later, the next chapters about insulator and all. So insulator is nothing, it is the bad conductor because light or electricity cannot pass through it. So some substances allow heat and electricity to pass through it, but some substances, they do not allow heat and electricity to pass through. So we have already seen that the copper wires are covered with what? Plastic. Otherwise what happen? If there is no covering for the wires, what will happen then? Yes, when we touch it, we definitely get the shock. You know, when we are ironing, you know, iron box, outer covering is what? Plastic, and the wire, of course. But if any part of the wire is getting broken, when we iron the cloth, if you touch that area, definitely we get the shock. And if the switchboard is complained, you know that it should be corrected very easily, should be repaired very fast. Otherwise, there is chance for getting the electric shock. Because metal is a good conductor of electricity and our body is also a good conductor of electricity. So materials can be classified based on their ability to allow heat and electricity to pass through. Based on that, we can say some substances are good conductors of heat and electricity. Typical example, metal is a good conductor of heat and electricity. And you know the plastic as well as the wood, they are the bad conductors of heat and electricity. Bad or otherwise we can call as poor conductors of heat and electricity. So we discussed about mainly now 3 properties. First one is the ability to float or sink in water. That is, the substances that are heavier can sink in water, or they will sink in water. If they are lighter, they will float on the water. Then about the ability to allow the light to pass through it. Based on that, we can divide the materials into 3 groups. Transparent, yes, come on. Opaque, yes. Translucent. Clear? Transparent, light can pass through very clearly. Then opaque, no, light cannot pass through it. Then what about translucent? Some amount of light can be passed through it. Now we can move on to another important properties, that is soluble and insoluble substances. Soluble and insoluble substances. Soluble and insoluble substances. When I say this, I hope you will understand or you can guess what is meant by soluble. What is meant by soluble substances? Substances that dissolves in water. Substances that dissolves in water. They are known as soluble substances. Then what about insoluble? Substances that, who can say, that do not dissolve in water, are known as insoluble substances. Clear? Soluble substances are substances that dissolves in water. When we add such substances to the water, it will easily mixes with the water. And what about insoluble substances? Insoluble substances are substances that when we add such substances to the water, it doesn't mix with the water. And another 2, miscible liquids, and liquids can be classified into 2. Miscible liquids and next one, immiscible. Miscible liquids and immiscible liquids. What is by miscible liquids? Liquids that mixes with the water. Liquids that mixes with the water are known as miscible liquids. Liquids that do not mix with the water. do not mix with the water. Such substances are known as immiscible liquids. Liquids that mixes with the water very easily, they are known as miscible liquids. If the liquid does not mixes with the water, they are known as immiscible liquid. Now I will show you the differences between miscible and immiscible liquid and the soluble and insoluble substances. Now just watch it. I would like to demonstrate it. Okay, my dear children, now please watch it. So I told you substances are or materials are classified based on their ability to mixes with the water. Some substances they mixes with the water, they are known as soluble substances. So typical example, salt and the sugar. So just you can watch it. So I am adding, see, spoon of salt, the glass of water. Just observe it. So see what will happen. See what will happen. Okay. See, this salt completely dissolves in water. This salt will completely dissolve in water. Okay, I hope you can see this water. So when I add the salt into the glass of water, the salt will clearly mixes with the water. Can you see the salt here? No. So we can say salt is an example of soluble substances. Salt is an example of soluble substances because when I add salt to the glass of water, what happens? Salt mixes with the water very easily. And similarly, sugar also. If I add a spoon of sugar to the glass of water, same thing will happen. Now we can see insoluble substances. Substances that do not mixes with the water are known as insoluble substances. See, this is a glass of water. Example of insoluble substances we can say is a spoon of sand. Clear? I'm adding a spoon of sand to this glass of water. Then see what will happen. Hope you can see it. See, still these grains are there, isn't it? Still these grains are there in the water. Hope you can see it. See. How many times I stir also no problem, nothing will happen, the sand will remain as such. See, these powder substances are there in it, the sand is there. So this is an example. So sand is, or the small, the soil powder, these all are example of what? Example of insoluble substances. Clear? So insoluble substances are substances that do not mixes with the water very easily. If they mixes with the water, they are known as soluble substances. If they do not mixes with the water, they are known as insoluble substances. Now, again I told you two more things about the liquids. The liquid that mixes with the water, they are known as what? Miscible liquid. So just we can vote. Example, honey is an example of miscible liquid. Honey, you all know what is honey. And lemon juice. They all are example of miscible liquid. So I will show you what happened when we add a spoon of honey into the glass of water. Spoon of honey to the glass of water. This is the amount of honey. Just add to this glass of water. I'm adding the spoon of honey to the glass of water. See, hope you can see it. Can you separate the honey from the water? Can you separate it? Can you separate honey and water? No, honey just completely mixes with the water. Hope you can see it. Honey completely mixes with the water. Clear? Such substances are known as what? Miscible liquids. Such liquids are known as what? Miscible liquid. Liquid that clearly mixes with the water are known as miscible liquids. Clear? Then one more thing I told you about the immiscible liquids. Immiscible liquids are liquids that will not mixes with the water. Example we can say about the oil. What will happen? Just watch. What will happen if we add small amount of oil to the water? See what will happen. if we add, see, just see, after stirring, yes, after stirring, this, I would like to keep for 1 second as such. You can just observe that oil floats on the water. To see that oil, you can see oily tint or oil float on the water. Clear? We can see the oil float on the water. Is it like the honey? No. When we add honey, we couldn't see honey afterwards in the water. Honey mixes with the water very easily. But when we add oil to the water, what will happen? You can see, or what had happened? Oil floats in the water. Oil doesn't mix completely with the water. Clear? So you have seen different examples. They are the salt solution example of what? Soluble substances. Salt mixes with the water. It is known as the salt solution. Then example of soluble substances. Example of insoluble substances, the sand water, isn't it? When I add sand to a glass of water, we could see that, the muddy water, isn't it? Then about when I add miscible liquid, when I add a spoon of honey to the glass of water, can we see the honey again? No, we couldn't see. Then when I add oil to the glass of water, we could see that oil float on the water. So these are the properties of the materials. Some are soluble substances, some are insoluble substances, some liquids are miscible liquid, some are immiscible liquid. Hope it is very clear, my dear children. Okay, yes. So now, as I used to say every time, read the textbook, complete the exercises, study well, don't waste your time. Please be safe at home, my dear children. Stay home, stay safe. Until we meet in the next class, it's bye from me. Bye.